In this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Russian Navy gets bombed, and not in a good way. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano, and welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. If you're new to the channel, haven't been here before, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Okay, we've been covering a lot about the Ever Forward and the grounding in the Chesapeake Bay, but I also do a lot of other news. And one of the things I've been covering a lot is the Ukraine-Russia war. I was on FreightWaves TV today, as a matter of fact, talking about both topics. If you're interested in that, there'll be a link to the episode right there so you can watch the full video. But today I want to talk about an event that happened in actually Ukraine, but it involved the Russians. So the other day, I posted a story where I talked about this, the Russians landing ship docks in Ukraine. This is a Mike Scholler story from March 21st, and it features an image of the Russian landing craft, the Orsk, coming into a port in southern Ukraine. This is the port of Berdyansk. Berdiansk is largely a grain terminal. And you'll see right here, the Orsk is here behind this floating crane. The Russians brought this floating crane in, as you'll see, to offload this vessel. And what you have over here are large grain terminal. Basically, these are what you use to swing around and dump grain into vessels. And Berdiansk is on the Sea of Azov. I'll show you the Sea of Azov here. Oh, actually, this is what the Orsk looks like specifically. She's what's called a landing ship tank. She's got these large bow doors here, so the vessel can actually run up on the beach. If you need to, open up those bow doors and vessels can drive off. She can use her crane to offload cargo, and then she has a stern ramp that opens up so that you can basically remove the cargo off her. This is the Sea of Azov. Over here, you have the Gulf of Odessa. This is the Crimean Peninsula. Sea of Azov, you'll see no vessels at all in here. That's because they've turned their AIS tracking off. They've gone stealth, so you don't see it. And if we zoom in here to the port of Berdiansk, you'll see right here, it's not a huge port by any means. Just a few berths here, grain terminals here. There are those grain elevators I was talking about. Zoom in just a little bit more here, we can get in. And so you'll see here those elevators that we saw, and the vessel we saw, the Orsk, was right here, docked right here at the very end of the west side of the quay. If you look right here, you'll see her. Those are the cranes right there. And she's basically docked probably right around here somewhere. And so the Russians, I mentioned, are using this to their advantage. Russian have been having their supply lines attacked. Their trucks, their tankers have been being hit by the Ukrainians. And one of the things I mentioned was the Russians really want to start using these ports because they can bring in more vessels with more quantity of goods, more support gear. And that would be a big thing for the Russians. Well, I'm not sure who was listening. It may have been the Ukrainians, but somebody listened to me about that. Now, before they can bring that vessel in, they had to clear out vessels that were in port. This story came out on Maritime Executive. Russian forces relocate 5 foreign flag ships from Berdiansk. Russian forces have removed and relocated 5 bulkers that were berthed at the captured port of Berdiansk, according to the governor of whatever the region is. They said that there were 5 ships in port, and some of them were fully loaded. We see this in the customs documents. Some were partially loaded. A few days ago, these ships disappeared from the port. According to the people, they were driven away by Russian tugs. So these vessels had been abandoned by their crew. The crews had been gotten out. Not sure what flag they were and who they're from. We know that they had Ukrainian grain on them. They were slated to sail. Some were loaded, some were partially loaded, but the Russians came in and have moved them. The story here is relocated. I like to say they were pirated because the Russians have no right to do this. They've basically just stolen ships, internationally flagged vessels, and have moved them. So the Russians started using this port, and the Ukrainians took notice of this, as we will see. I want to show you now a report from RT, which is the Russian news service. And listen, before you start screaming at me, I know what the RT is. I know that they're a propaganda machine for Russia, but I want to show the report because it'll put in the context what happens next. Okay, this is that RT report. You'll see the image here is exactly the same. You see the Orsk, you see the Russian crane, and you see the grain terminals. Go ahead and let this play.
By land, air, and now sea, Russian troops continue to advance and reinforce into Ukraine. This is a unique sight, a Russian naval armada at a port which Ukrainian troops had abandoned without a fight, leaving its facilities entirely intact. The Azov Sea, with its ports and towns, is now under Russian control, all save several districts in the coastal city of Mariupol, which has allowed Russia's Black Sea Fleet and the Orsk landing ship to stage this operation. Translated from Russian, this is a large marine ship, codenamed Alligator by NATO. It is armed, this large caliber autocannon, for example, but the point of this ship is to transport troops and heavy equipment. It can fit as many as 20 tanks or 40 armored personnel carriers, along with hundreds upon hundreds of troops. This conflict is one of the most intense in recent decades. Both sides have leveraged sophisticated and highly destructive weapons. For Russia's operation to succeed, it is paramount that troops are supplied and reinforced non-stop.
So that RT video gives you the idea of what the Russians had in mind in using the port of Berdiansk. They wanted to use it as a resupply base. You can bring in a lot of goods. You saw them loading those BTRs, their armored personnel carriers, out. There was a question about using the crane on the vessel. I don't think the crane on the vessel is either rated to lift vehicles that heavy, or it may not be working, which wouldn't surprise me with the Russian fleet. This image was from a few days ago of those vessels coming in, probably the Orsk, some tugs, and some other vessels coming into the port. And so the Russians were using this area for a logistics hub. The problem with this is RT broadcast this to everybody. Not only that, the Ukrainians see this, and they kept this vessel here for an inordinate period of time. And what that allowed the Ukrainians to do was strike. This is the story from Reuters right here. Russian landing ship Orsk destroyed at the port of Berdiansk, Ukraine claims. I think they can do a little bit more than claim that based on some of the videos we've seen. So this is a video that was taken, a really good one. You'll see the Orsk burning profusely in the background. She is an Alligator-class LST, and then these two Ropucha-class LSTs are getting underway. Notice the explosions. You can see the open bow door on the Orsk, and just explosions as cargo on board ignites. Could be ammunition, fuel, whatever it is. She's on fire, burning profusely at this time. Even these LSTs getting underway seem to have some fire on board, possibly from secondary explosions, heat radiated, or they got hit. But you'll watch them kind of book out of here fairly quickly to avoid the scene. Meanwhile, the Orsk is fully involved on fire. And this is a danger of using ports that are not under your full control. You don't have air control. You don't have basically the control of the airspace over them. You'll see the far LST now. She's got black smoke on her. Vehicles, something on deck, are burning, but both those LSTs are moving away from the berth at this time, while the Orsk is fully engulfed in fire. No telling how many people died, killed. Obviously, it's not a joking matter. This is war, and it never really is. But here they are striking at the port, and you're getting the full image and view of what happens. Just share a couple of still photos and some analysis that was done. This now means that the Russians will not be able to use that port for logistics unless they're able to push the Ukrainians further back. The still photo there shows you those two burning LSTs leaving the area right there. This was a analysis done by Covert Shores on Twitter, where they're looking at the image of the vessels. You can see the Orsk burning here, and then the two Ropucha-class LSTs a little further ahead, burning on the left, and the Ropuchas sailing out there on the right. And then this satellite image later in the day, where we see plumes of smoke coming off the end of the pier where the vessel was, and the other LSTs back out at sea. Now, Why is this important and why bring this up in this video? Well, a couple of things. The Russians are probably going to bring in more supply ships. They have moved a large chunk of their Baltic fleet into the Black Sea prior to the attack. And a lot of these vessels, these LSTs, which some people have been talking about are going to stage an amphibious invasion, that's not what they're going to do at all. They're going to stage basically landings like this where they can offload equipment and supplies to assist. Also notice when they were offloading that vessel, the vessel didn't have containers, didn't even have pallets. They move cargo on Russian ships the way you moved them in the 1960s and 70s. Pretty archaic, not exactly fast at all, and they lack the capability to even offload their own vehicles. They needed to bring in that floating crane. The two types of weapons that were potentially used that we're seeing talked about is this Bayraktar, which is a drone, a Turkish drone, what's called the TB2. Very large drone, sometimes fitted with 4 missiles, or can be used, packed with explosives and used in suicide attacks. Not really suicide, there's nobody on it. But it's either these were used or there was an earlier attack of a ballistic missile attack on the port. The problem with the ballistic missile attack is they're not very precise. And so they have a big circle of error probability. But we know there was a ballistic missile attack earlier because of remnants of ballistic missiles on the pier. So we don't know what was used in the weapon. I don't think it really matters, tell you the truth. The point is the ports are going to be targeted by the Ukrainians if the Russians use them. Now, this also means that the Russians, if they can't use the ports, may start targeting them themselves. Those vessels that have been abandoned by foreign crews may become targets at this point. Interesting to me is we've seen this historically, by the way. We knew that if you go and use logistics ships forward deployed without good air cover, there's the risk of them getting hit. You only got to go back to 1982 in the Falklands War at Bluff Cove to see that a Royal Fleet Auxiliary landing ship logistics vessel was hit and sunk in that attack. Another one was also damaged. Very similar ships to what we saw being used by the Russians. Matter of fact, almost eerily similar. I mean that vessel has a very very same appearance to this. I should also note that the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Navy are thinking about similar vessels right now, what are called light amphibious warships. They want to use these new light amphibious warships in and out of the Western Pacific because they can, quote, zip around at 14 knots and dump Marines and their logistical equipment. The problem is, as you just saw with the Orsk in the Ukrainian port, they are exposed to danger. If they don't have adequate air protection, self-defense features, there's the potential that they can too become targets. So an interesting story I wanted to share. Again, it's looking at the sea logistics and sea support side of what's going on. The danger is that the war in Ukraine and Russia expands beyond the northern shore of the Black Sea. We're already seeing mines being used. When you start laying mines in waters, they break loose, they drift. That can impact other vessels in the Black Sea. If the Russians retaliate for this sinking against other vessels in Ukrainian ports, you may see commercial vessels hit. There's a large Chinese container ship sitting in Odessa right now. And what happens if the Russians hit that? I don't know. But there is that potential for this war to widen. We've already seen commercial vessels struck. We've seen commercial merchant mariners killed. We've seen a commercial merchant ship sunk. And so this has the potential to begin to expand. So I just want to put together all that information from that. I want to thank a couple of key sources on this. Dr. Phil Weir on Twitter, fantastic person to follow if you don't get a chance to do that. Really recommend you do it. Wrote a great book on Dunkirk, the small ships involved. Please go over, watch, go follow him on Twitter. I'll have a link over to Phil in the show notes so that you can go over there. And then H.I. Sutton over at Covert Shores. Both of them have been covering this. And matter of fact, both had a great discussion on Twitter about this port and what's been going on. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe, hit the bell so be alerted about new videos when they come out. Leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share it across social media. And if you can, become a Patreon. Patreons support the page, help us put out the details we want. New idea for our Patreons, want to make our Patreons know, we're going to let them know, is a couple of behind the scenes videos, a little bit of personal videos about what's going on with shipping, a little bit about myself, and perhaps even the crew here, what's going on with shipping. One of them is up and about, as you can hear. So we'll be posting that fairly soon. So until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.